You're listening to Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. On each episode, we sit down with key industry experts to discover more about what's happening in the world of learning and development, from current trends and insights to the most valuable lessons learned along the way. Join us for a fresh perspective on all things training and the best direction forward.
Welcome to the Learning Leader Spotlight podcast. And in this podcast, we help to prepare the learning leaders of tomorrow by sharing insights of the learning leaders of today. So I'm your guest host, Lori Fancher, and I'm a relationship manager with Training Pros. Training Pros is an L&D contract staffing company. We like to say that when you have more projects than people, let us help you find the best consultant so that you can start your projects with confidence. And today I'm honored to have as my special guest, Ben Sieke of Delta Dental Insurance Company. Ben is the Director of Talent and Learning at Delta Dental. Welcome, Ben.
Hey, thank you for having me, Laura. It's always good to spend time with you.
Absolutely. We've known each other for quite a while now, and I always enjoy your insights and your wisdom about L&D in this space, and I know our folks listening will too.
Look, I always enjoy, our partnership is something that I've treasured ever since we first started working together. So I'm glad we can do this.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So Ben, just to jump right in, can you share with us in 60 seconds, a little bit about who Ben is and the work that you do?
Yeah. So, I'm Ben Sieke. Outside of work, I'm a husband. I play drums in a 90s cover band, right? I have a whole other life, which is wonderful. But I also have a wonderful work life where, you called it out. I'm the head of learning at Delta Dental of California and affiliated companies. We're the world's largest private dental insurer. I get to lead an amazing national group of learning professionals that support a range of learning activities for our employees, ranging from onboarding our frontline staff to supporting leadership and executive development, to compliance and safety training, and more. We're building a culture of growth and mobility, and our results show it. We've got benchmark beating employee sentiment around growth and learning, and we've got internal mobility rates that have been beating industry benchmarks each of the last few years.
That's awesome, Ben. So just curious, what first attracted you to the field of L&D?
It's a great question. And I think like a lot of us, I didn't grow up. If you asked me in kindergarten and said, Ben, what do you want to do when you grow up? I wouldn't have said I want to be a corporate learning professional. So it's something I had to find my way to. I thought I was going to be a musician. That was what my undergrad was in. And I think like a lot of us, I realized that some things are meant to be hobbies, right? So I needed to go and figure out like, what did I want to do for a job? I went back to, I'm fascinated by people. And as a kid, I was very entrepreneurial, and it made me sort of think like, what about a career in HR that sort of combines those things, people and business? I went through some informational interviews to get to understand what that work looks like in practice. And the ones that really resonated with me were my interviews with learning professionals. And I thought there's something really cool about this work. There's something very human in all of us that we like to feel like we're good at what we do. And the idea that in learning, besides driving impact for the organization, right, helping to achieve business goals and all of that, that at this very human level, we can do work that unlocks potential, help people do their best work, help them find satisfaction in their work, is what attracted me to this and is what continues to keep me engaged in doing this work.
Awesome. Thank you for that insight. It's always so interesting to hear these stories about our journeys to the L&D space. I love that you were, your heart and passion in the beginning was a musician, and look how you have used that creativity and that people orientation to do so well in your field today.
It's funny. Like sometimes people will ask, I think they ask all the time, like for whatever people's first act was, like, what about that prepared you to do this other thing? And you had this big takeaway. And I think this is true for a lot of us that pursue a lot of different, whether it's arts, whether it's hobbies. There's a craft to it that you can learn these things. Like no one wakes up in the morning and they're the most incredible violinist or guitarist or singer in the world. You practice at these things, right? So there's certainly a mindset that I bring to this work that I gained as a music student of, for most people can accomplish and learn most things if they put their mind to it. And that's, I think, where the work that we get to do comes into play, where we're just facilitating.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So what are the most impactful changes you have seen, Ben, in L&D in the last 5 years?
You know, there's a lot, obviously, right? I think my mind goes first to some notable changes in learning technology. It's probably cliche to start here, but I can't skip AI, Lori, right? I think we got to talk about
Right.
AI. And there's different ways that manifests itself in our work, right? One of them is all of the tools that are available to learning professionals that make our work easier and more efficient. I think in particular about some of the tools that my instructional design team uses, right? Where tools they've been using for a long time, all of a sudden now have AI built into them that just streamline parts of the work that were very time consuming, right? Whether it's Articulate or Beyond, being able to use AI generated or create content using generative AI, build storyboards. Kahoot has introduced some AI, generative AI tools again to build games in their platform. So just some really cool stuff that helps people that do this work in our field be more efficient. The other interesting one is how learners are interacting with AI as, I don't know if I'll call it a content modality, but alongside other ways of consuming content, right? I think about conversation simulators. That's it. It's not that that's a new concept, but with AI behind them, they blow me away when I interact with these things. I can interact with them just like you and I would interact. They give me feedback that's spot on. They tell me what I did well and what I need to improve on. It's really remarkable. And I've seen people introduce generative AI chatbots, chat agents into e-learning content to create adaptive learning experiences that even 5 years ago would have been difficult or impossible to create when you think about behind the scenes, what someone would have needed to program and put in there to create those kinds of experiences. So AI is a huge one. And I'm not the first person or the last person to say this, but it's something all of us need to lean into, right? It is here. It is here to stay. It is evolving quickly. If we're not interested in it and engaged in it, then we're falling behind, right? And I know that's something you and I have talked about a million. Like you've been very on top of that, Lori, and I know a lot of us in the space are. The other is how learning platforms are changing. LMSs were the king of this space for a long time, and they've increasingly become antiquated and less relevant. Some of that is LXPs have come into their own, right? Platforms that really put the learner experience first. Because the reporting and the backend administration stuff, it's important to us, but we're in the business of creating good learning experiences. So that platform landscape has changed and there are cool tools. I'll give a shout out to Viva Learning, which embeds learning content from a variety of sources directly into Microsoft Teams that start to bring to life that vision of learning in the flow of work in ways that, again, we couldn't really realize 5 years ago. Now you can access learning content directly in workplace productivity tools in ways that we couldn't. So it is very cool to continue to watch learning technology evolve and think about what it means for our teams and what it means for our learners.
Yes, absolutely. So that's the last 5 years. And so that leads me to the next question. Um, where are we headed? I mean, what would you envision all of this looking like as we move forward into the next 5?
I mean, it's a great question. And I think to your point, I'll kind of go back to where we're at a moment in time. And I think the last couple of years are predictive in some ways of the next few years. We're going to continue to see a lot of evolution in learning technology. that's going to change how we deliver solutions. Yeah, I was talking the other day with our chief people officer, and I know we've all seen this over the course of our career, that every time a new technology comes out, people ask the question, is this going to replace instructor-led training, right? And the answer is it never does, but what it does is add to the toolbox or the tapestry or whatever metaphor we want to use, all the things that we as learning professionals get to pull on in order to meet the need at hand. So I think there's an onus that's placed on us to really stay on top of this so that we're playing with a full deck of cards and so that we can bring the full set of solutions to bear. Because even if the current and the old way of doing things don't go away, they're constantly being supplemented. And what we use what for changes. A great example of that is these AI conversation simulators. It used to be that if you really wanted to role play a conversation and get good feedback, you had to do that live with human beings, right? That was a use case for why does this need to be instructor-led training? Well, you need to have the facilitator there. It doesn't take away from the value of facilitators, but you can recreate some of that now without that. And so we need to stay on top of those changes because otherwise we're just living in the past and doing the same thing that we've always done. I think two things that, when I think about the next 5 or 10 years, they're not new, but I think they're going to be increasingly important as they have been for the last several years. One is being able to demonstrate business impact. It worries me that there's still a lot of conversation in the industry about how do we demonstrate the value of training.
Right.
That's going to come home to roost if we as an industry don't work through that. And I'll say this, I place a lot of emphasis on my team in that. It's not a nut that no one has cracked. But there are still learning leaders and learning practitioners that are focused on the solution, focused on, the learning solution that they are building and not focused on the business problem that they're trying to solve or the outcome that they're trying to drive. So I'd say really trying to run our business as learning leaders like any other business, right? If you were in charge of sales and someone said, what's the impact of your sales organization? It wouldn't be enough to say, oh, well, they're out there making a lot of calls. People seem to really like them. Like people, you say, well, no, show me the results. Are you selling, right? Or, is this working or not? We need to be able to easily answer that question. And I think we're still inconsistent with that. I'll say on that note too, I'm a big fan of the concept of ROE, return on expectations. I didn't come up with that, admittedly, I forget who did, but sometimes folks get hung up on this monetary ROI thing where if we invested $100,000 or $1 million in this initiative, then I need to be able to explain exactly how many dollars in return on investment I got back. In my experience, at least, it's very uncommon that someone comes and asks for that sort of a explanation of value. Normally, your clients want to understand, did the thing that we did fix the problem that it was trying to fix, or did it get us to the place we were trying to go? And so I'll throw that out there for anyone that has gotten a little wrapped around the axle on needing to show how much money this made. And sometimes that's the right answer. I think more often than not, people are just looking to understand, did this do something? Did it do what we hoped it would do? The other thing, when I think about the next 5 or 10 years, and again, not new, but becoming increasingly important, and it's tied to that, are we just building solutions or are we really solving problems, is building the performance consulting muscle within our teams, right? And that can be people with the role of performance consultant. I've got a few on my team. I was a performance consultant once upon a time in a previous role. It can also just be embedding the performance consulting mindset in our teams. But for anyone that's not familiar, that's listening to this, it's really taking a root cause analysis, problem solving approach to this. We can get trapped as L&D practitioners. It's an old saying, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When we get brought into something, it's very easy for us to go into learning needs analysis mode. And, is this training? Is it not training? If it was training, what would the solution look like? Whatever. The performance consultant takes a step back from that and really tries to understand what is the problem we're trying to solve and what's causing it. which leads, I think, to some really valuable conversations, including the conversation of, is this learning or not? And then if we had hours, Lori, we could go into just a ton of examples from me and my team of times where when you start to peel back the onion, you start to realize that the problem isn't what you thought it was, or the solution is a little more nuanced than what we think it is. And again, if we're in the business of solving problems, I think that performance consulting approach is a really important one for us to take so that we're not just building things, we're delivering real.
I love that, Ben. Thank you for sharing that. And understand it's so important for the new folks coming in to understand that not everything is a training problem and not everything can be fixed with training. And what
Right.
is that root cause? And I love that you brought up performance consulting. I haven't heard it talked about as much in alignment with learning. Um, so thank you for that. So what is the most well, before I skip ahead to that, I just have to ask because this is a question near and dear to everyone's hearts and all of our listeners is if you did have unlimited budget, you could do anything you wanted to do. What would that be, Ben?
So first I have to say that I'm very grateful to, and no one's making me say this, right? I truly mean it. It comes from my heart. I'm grateful to work for a company in Delta Dental that is really good about investing in learning and development initiative. I don't, to your question, have unlimited money, of course. But what I've found, and I think you and I have had this experience here in getting funding for our work together, that when we put a good business case together, we can get executive and business support for putting learning resources against business outcomes. So I could always, to your question, I could always use some more money. And yes, if I had unlimited money, I have some ideas. But I'll just say that first, that I'm fortunate here that it is easier to get that buy-in when we show up with a good case than I've experienced in other organizations I've worked in. That having been said, if I had 10 times as much money, it's funny. We were talking about AI and technology and how some of that can replace some things that people are doing today. If I had unlimited resources, just responding to feedback from our employees, I would invest it in more human experiences, more coaching. So we won in addition to the couple of Brandon Hall Awards that we won in partnership with Training Pros for some really cool work that we've done with our contact center and operational parts of our business. We won a Brandon Hall Award for our executive coaching program last year. We've piloted a frontline leader coaching program. And the more coaching we do, the more desire there is for coaching. And so that's something that we have some executive sponsorship. It's really a question of finding the right time with the budget to make more investment and not just for leaders, but even looking at the way coaching can support individual contributors, can support people going through role transitions, all of that stuff. And the other is mentoring. That's also an interesting space when we think about technology. Back in the day, right? I think those of us that were involved in running mentoring programs before technology started to enable those, it was a lot of hand matching people, right? And I mean, and to scale a mentoring program across even a mid-sized organization was a lot of work. Now there's some really cool tools that automate a lot of that. And if I could get a check cut for that tomorrow, there'd be a lot of folks in the organization that would want to use that to get a mentor.
Yeah, absolutely. Since you brought it up, mentoring, I'm just curious if you think about those folks who have been mentors throughout your career, really influential folks in your career, what comes to mind? Who comes to mind?
I'm fortunate, and as I guess I hope a lot of us are, I hope you are too, Lori, that in some ways it's hard to answer that question because I've got to work with and for a lot of really smart and cool people and people that I learned a lot from. I think two that come to mind first, shout out to Ani Acker, who was our VP of Learning and Development when I was at Weight Watchers. She was the first, that was where I started my career in learning and development. She was the first head of learning that I worked for. And I just thought, A, she was the coolest person, and B, had the coolest job. And her work in that role and her perspective on this work inspired me to go on this journey to become a head of learning myself. So, I think about, I'm overdue to catch up with Ani, but she's somebody I think about a lot because she had this formative impact on me. Another person, and this person I keep up with a lot more, is my manager over our operations training team when I was at Union Bank, Linda Figueroa. And Linda was, Linda was a lot of things. I was going to say she's just this. I don't want to boil anyone down to one thing, but Linda was a really effective people leader. And I learned, like, she knew the work. She built great relationships with clients. Like, there's a long list of things you could say about, like, Linda was great at this, great at this, great at this. But there are lessons that I think about that I learned from her all the time about how to treat people, how to lead your team. I had worked for some good leaders directly before her, but up till that point in my career, she by far the best people leader that I'd worked for. And even since that, just Linda is a really good people leader, and left a real impression on me. So shout out to you, Lynn.
Awesome. Awesome. So when we talked about all of the different things that we can foresee going into the future, and you think about your team, how does your team shift or change? What kind of skill set do you find would be the most important for an L&D professional on a team like yours today?
A great question. And it's funny, Lori, like, it kind of takes me back to some of the things we've already been talking about around investing in performance consulting skills across all roles. So really challenging whether you're an instructional designer, a learning technologist, a trainer, a leader in the space, to take a root cause analysis approach to the work and really make sure that the work we're doing is anchored in outcomes and problem solving. And then making sure we keep up with technology, right? We talked about budget earlier. My team and I make sure we're very intentional about budgeting for our team to do ongoing professional development, some of which is soft skills, some of which is, like, I'll call them learning technical skills, right? The science of learning, the work of instructional design. And some of it's very much keeping up with what's happening in technology. I'd say it's really those things, right? Like, I've got strong trainers, I've got strong instructional designers. Like, we do those things well. There's always room to improve. When I think about the future, it is, how do we embrace performance consulting and how do we stay on top of quickly emerging changes in learning?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So what is your source for industry news and information? Where do you go, Ben?
Well, besides this podcast, of course, Lori, this podcast I go to first. After that, I'm a longtime ATD member. I am a former president of the LA chapter. I love their research. I love the tools that they provide. Again, going back to budgeting, I make sure that my team has access to ATD memberships because I just find that to be a font of wisdom and tools and support for what we do. There's a couple of more general HR news sources. There's a shout out to HR Brew, which is a newsletter. I love it. It comes in my inbox every day. HR Executives, another site. I like following also general HR stuff outside of L&D just because I feel like it makes me a better partner to have a sense of what's going on and changing in my peers and colleagues' worlds. And then I read the news every day. I know it sounds dumb, but we're business leaders and the work that we do doesn't happen in a vacuum. And so I find it beneficial to kind of stay on top of world events and what's happening, because whether those things have a business impact or whether they're things that impact how people are feeling, like, all of that stuff ends up coming back to work. So I find it beneficial to have a pulse on sort of what's going on in the broader world beyond Delta Dental and beyond L&D.
I love that answer. Thank you, Ben. The last question. What is the one book that everyone coming into the L&D field should read?
I'm going to be difficult and answer this in two ways. It's so hard. These are such good questions, Lori, and it's hard to boil it down to the one thing, but I'll keep it to two. Just general L&D. So not specific to learning leadership. I think if I had truly unlimited budget, I would buy every L&D practitioner in the world a copy of Telling Aid Training. It's not a new book, right? It's a foundational tome in what we do. And I draw on fundamental concepts from that book all the time, including, and probably most importantly, that the essence of our work lies in our focus on the learner. We can get wrapped up in falling in love with the stuff we do, the content that we build or deliver, the schedule that I need to keep to, all of that. But one of the great messages from Telling Aid Training is we are at our most effective when we remember and focus on the fact that our goal is to get our learners from where they are to where they need to be. The other, I'll shout out for a book I guess I've read recently. I love reading memoirs from business leaders, especially CEOs, so not just learning leaders, that give insight into their experiences and how they make decisions. I just think it's fascinating. In a book I read a couple years ago, Hot Seat by Jeff Immelt, who's the former CEO of GE. Great book. For anyone that knows him, like he caught some heat. He came after Jack Welch, caught some heat. The company went through some difficult times. People were questioning his decision making. To get a front row seat into how he navigated some of those challenges and why and how he made the decisions he made and how he thinks about leadership. I just think it's great whenever you get to have a lens into someone who leads at that level. And it challenges us to think about how we make decisions as leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have to check that out.
It's a good read.
Yeah. I've heard the other book. I mean, the other book has been around a long time. So thank you for sharing that. And so as our guest today, we would like to express our gratitude with a small gift. We would like to plant 5 trees in your name. So thank you, Ben.
That's so kind, Lori. I appreciate that. And well, that's nice. The world will get a little greener after today.
Yes, absolutely. So that is Training Pros Charity. Our focus is on reforestation, and to date, we've planted over 3,500 trees in the last few years, so that we've been doing this. So we'll add your 5 to that. And so I just want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and sharing your insights into the L&D field and for being our guest today, Ben.
Look, I appreciate you having me, Lori, and I mean it when I say I always enjoy the time we get to spend together. So this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining this episode of the Learning Leader Spotlight with Ben Sieke. Have a great week.
Thanks for joining us for the latest episode of Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. You'll find links in the show notes to any resources mentioned on today's show. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review.